Welcome in, everyone. It is great to have you joining us today. We are looking at a deeply compelling, really fascinating biographical text that details the life and career of Major General George Philip Bradley Roberts, though he was almost universally known as Pip.
Pip, yeah.
Grand Pip. And the mission for our deep dive today is to explore a highly specific blueprint. We're going to look at how possessing an intensely deep, technical mastery of your field can ultimately lead to unprecedented leadership success, like on a massive scale.
It's a phenomenal blueprint to study, really. When you examine the sheer scale and the speed of what this individual achieved throughout his career, it requires us to completely rethink how we view executive leadership and command.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the military historian Richard Meade describes Roberts as, quote, the outstanding British armored commander of the war.
That's a huge statement.
It's monumental. I mean, the Second World War produced a vast number of exceptional commanders across multiple nations.
Yeah.
So to be designated as the single outstanding British armored commander, we really want to understand how someone actually earns that distinction. What's the foundational strategy there?
What's fascinating here is that Roberts was not your traditional big picture, point at a map kind of thinker, the type who stayed far behind the lines in a chateau somewhere. He was fundamentally a master of the details. His career is basically a masterclass in how to adapt to incredibly rapid technological and tactical shifts.
Right, because everything was changing so fast.
Exactly. When you operate in an environment where the actual machinery of your profession is evolving by the month, you cannot just rely on high-level theory. You have to understand the ground truth of the equipment.
And to understand how he built that ground truth, we really need to look at his foundation. The timeline provided in the source gives us a really clear picture of his trajectory. So Roberts was born on November 5, 1906.
In Quetta, British India.
Right, to an Army officer. So military culture was just his environment from day one. He is educated at Marlborough College, then he goes to the Royal Military College, Sandhurst. And by February 4th, 1926, he is officially commissioned into the Royal Tank Corps.
And that specific timing, right in the mid-1920s, is a crucial piece of context. Because tanks were still very much an emerging technology.
They were barely a decade old at that point.
Yeah, the First World War proved they could break a trench stalemate, sure. But throughout the 1920s, global military forces were still trying to figure out exactly how to integrate them into a broader strategy, how to keep them running, what their real operational limits were.
Because they broke down constantly.
Oh, they were notoriously unreliable machines at that stage. Just constant maintenance nightmares.
Which brings us to a period of his life that, it might seem completely mundane at first glance, but is actually the cornerstone of everything he accomplished later. From 1933 to 1937, Roberts served as an instructor at the Tank Driving and Maintenance School at Bovington. And on paper, being a driving and maintenance instructor sounds like a purely administrative, maybe even a logistical detour.
It does. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, especially for you listening, as you navigate your own professional hurdles, this 4-year period is everything. It is everything. While other officers might have been chasing, more glamorous field assignments to boost their profiles, Roberts was literally learning how these machines work inside and out.
Get his hands dirty.
Literally. He spent 4 solid years understanding the absolute nuts and bolts of armored vehicles, the engines, the tracks, the transmissions, the failure points.
It's the equivalent of, say, a modern tech CEO who actually spent years writing the complex back-end code themselves. Or like a restaurant empire owner who started out sweating on the line as a prep chef. They possess an inherent, almost instinctual understanding of the daily friction their teams face.
That is a perfect parallel, because when Roberts eventually commands hundreds of tanks in a combat theater, he knows exactly what his equipment can and cannot do. If a supply officer tells him they have a certain amount of fuel, Roberts knows exactly how many miles that translates to in muddy terrain versus hard ground. He is never going to ask his crews to execute a maneuver that is mechanically impossible.
Which builds immense trust with the soldiers.
Huge trust. But conversely, he also knows exactly how far he can safely push the engineering limits of his armor to surprise an adversary. He knows the breaking point because he used to teach it.
And we see him push those limits very quickly as we move into his trial by fire during the Second World War, specifically in the North African campaign. By July 1942, he is commanding the 22nd Armored Brigade.
Right into the fire.
Right into it. He leads them through the Battle of Alam el Halfa and then the incredibly decisive Second Battle of El Alamein.
And those were brutal, grinding engagements. You really have to factor in the environmental reality of the Desert War, the intense heat, the pervasive sand getting into engines and moving parts.
Just chewing up the gears.
Exactly. The logistical nightmare of maintaining supply lines across vast, featureless expanses. It was a hostile environment for human beings, but it was an absolute meat grinder for complex machinery.
And he clearly thrives in that chaos. There are even photos from August 1942 showing him right in the thick of it, discussing troop dispositions with Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery, who of course commanded the British Eighth Army.
Right alongside Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, too.
Yeah, he's right there in the inner circle,
Uh-huh.
wearing his beret, deeply involved in the critical tactical decisions.
And his performance there leads to a very rapid lateral move. By mid-March 1943, he is transferred to command the 26th Armored Brigade. He leads them through the complex final stages of the Tunisian campaign, just continuously applying pressure until the Axis powers finally surrender in North Africa in mid-May.
The recognition for his leadership during this period is incredibly rapid. In December 1942, he is mentioned in dispatches, which essentially means his gallant actions were officially detailed in a report to high command.
A big deal on its own.
Definitely. Then, in January 1943, he is awarded the Distinguished Service Order, or DSO, which is a highly prestigious recognition for leadership under active fire.
Yeah.
And then, just a few months later, in July 1943, he's awarded a bar to his DSO.
Which means he won it twice.
Basically, yeah. He won this incredibly prestigious medal for a second time. Receiving a second bar is explicitly noted in the text as a, quote, rare honor. He has undeniably proven himself as a battlefield commander. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Because he's pulled out of the desert entirely, sent back to the United Kingdom.
Yes. In June 1943, he hands over his command in North Africa, returns to the UK, and takes command of the 30th Armored Brigade. Now, this brigade is part of Major General Percy Hobart's 79th Armored Division.
Oh, Hobart's Funnies.
Exactly. If you're familiar with military history, you likely know them by their more famous nickname, Hobart's Funnies.
This period requires close analysis because the 79th was not a standard combat division, not at all. They were specifically reorganized to develop, test, and control all the highly specialized armor for the upcoming Anglo-Canadian 21st Army Group operations. They were basically the experimental wing of the armored forces.
The mad scientists of the tank world.
Pretty much.
And Roberts' brigade is quickly equipped with Sherman Crab tanks. Now, for those who might not know, a Sherman Crab was a standard tank modified with a massive rotating cylinder on the front, covered in heavy chains or flails.
Just chains whipping around.
Ripping the ground. As the tank drove forward, the cylinder spun, and the chains would violently whip the dirt to deliberately detonate buried landmines safely ahead of the vehicle. I mean, imagine being pulled from traditional sweeping desert tank battles and suddenly being handed this wildly specialized, incredibly bizarre-looking machinery. It is quite literally being given the earliest access to beta technology.
It is, and this circles right back to his foundation at Bovington. Who better to evaluate the tactical viability of a flail tank than a former driving and maintenance instructor?
Oh, of course.
He knows how to assess the extra strain that flail mechanism puts on the tank's engine. He understands how the added weight affects the suspension, the fuel consumption. He is carefully observing how these specialized units operate, taking meticulous notes on how extreme engineering can solve highly specific tactical bottlenecks.
Like clearing a safe path through a dense minefield while actively under fire.
Exactly. He is expanding his tactical toolkit, moving from traditional maneuver warfare to highly specialized problem-solving operations.
And all of this preparation just perfectly sets the stage for the absolute peak of his leadership career. Because on December 6, 1943, Roberts is promoted to acting Major General and becomes the General Officer commanding of the 11th Armored Division.
Famously known as the Black Bull.
The Black Bull, yes.
Wow.
And he is just 37 years and 1 month old at the time of this promotion.
Which is a remarkably young age to command an entire armored division. To put that level of advancement in perspective, out of all the British general officers serving during the Second World War, only one individual, Robert Laycock, was younger than Roberts.
Just one.
Just one. And it really makes you wonder, what stands out to you when thinking about someone stepping into such massive responsibility at such a young age? How does someone at 37 handle the immense psychological weight of an entire division, knowing that every single logistical and tactical decision directly impacts the lives of thousands of personnel?
It requires an unbelievable level of internal fortitude. It really does. It also demonstrates the immense trust placed in him by the top brass. But he didn't skip any steps to get there.
No, not at all.
He had the 4 years learning the mechanics at Bovington,
Yeah.
the brutal crucible of the North African desert, the technical evaluation phase with Hobart's Funnies. He earned the right to command the division because he had demonstrated undeniable technical competence at every single echelon below it.
He had built a rock-solid foundation, and he would need to rely on every bit of that experience for the campaign ahead. Because the 11th Armored Division lands in Normandy shortly after the initial D-Day landings in June 1944.
And for the moment they arrive, the operational tempo is just relentless. They are immediately thrown into Operation Epsom in late June, followed by Operation Goodwood in mid-July, and then Operation Bluecoat.
It's important to contextualize the environment they were fighting in, too. The Battle of Normandy was not a fast-moving campaign initially. It was a brutal, grinding fight through the bocage.
The hedgerows.
Right. The bocage refers to the ancient, incredibly dense, practically impenetrable hedgerows that crisscross the French countryside. They were basically natural fortresses that restricted movement and created a nightmare scenario for tanks.
Oh, severely limiting their mobility and their lines of sight. But once the Allied forces finally break out, and the German forces in Normandy collapse after the Battle of the Falaise Pocket, the landscape changes entirely. And this is where the speed of the 11th Armored Division under Roberts' command becomes legendary. The numbers here are what really caught my attention in the text.
They are staggering.
Let's just look at this timeline. The division reaches the River Seine on August 28th. Just 3 days later, on August 31st, they have pushed all the way to Amiens. And by September 3rd, they arrive at the port city of Antwerp in Belgium.
Wow.
They moved an entire armored division across massive stretches of territory in a matter of days.
And arriving in Antwerp on September 3rd, 1944, holds immense historical symmetry. It was exactly 5 years to the day since the Second World War began.
Wow, 5 years to the day.
Yeah. This raises an important question regarding the hidden complexities of such an advance. Because behind that poetic date is a logistical mountain. How do you sustain that kind of momentum?
You can't just tell tanks to drive forward.
No. It's a complex calculus of fuel consumption, ammunition resupply, and managing the inevitable mechanical breakdowns over hundreds of miles.
Not to mention the sheer physical exhaustion of the human beings operating those machines. Driving a tank in 1944 was incredibly punishing. It was loud, it was hot, it was physically draining. And they were pushing forward day and night.
Precisely. It is a symphony of logistical and tactical mastery. Roberts' deep understanding of maintenance meant he could push his vehicles right to the very edge of their operational limits without completely breaking his division's combat effectiveness.
He knew exactly where the red line was.
Exactly. But as thrilling as that rapid advance across Europe was, the reality of warfare is that momentum is finite. The final acts of the war required a very different kind of endurance.
They did. The narrative in our text takes a noticeably darker turn as the seasons change. The division plays a supporting role in the airborne assaults of Operation Market Garden in late September. Then comes the bitter, freezing conditions of the Battle of the Bulge, stretching through December 1944 and into January 1945.
A completely different kind of war.
Yeah, and following that grueling winter, they are heavily involved in Operation Veritable in February and March.
They're fighting through dense forests, enduring terrible weather, and eventually executing the massive logistical feat of crossing the River Rhine in late March to participate in the final Western Allied invasion of Germany.
And it is during this final push that the nature of their mission shifts. It shifts from conventional tactical warfare to confronting something entirely different. The source material provides a very sobering historical fact here.
Yeah.
In mid-April 1945, Roberts' 11th Armored Division liberated the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp.
Yeah.
They then had to push on, continuing their advance and entering Lübeck in early May, just days before Victory in Europe Day.
We really need to pause and consider the immense emotional and psychological whiplash experienced by these commanders and their troops.
It's hard to even fathom.
It is. Over the span of less than 12 months, they transition from the exhilaration of the rapid, sweeping liberation of France and Belgium through a freezing, attritional winter campaign, only to suddenly stand face-to-face with the absolute darkest, most systematic horrors of humanity at Bergen-Belsen.
Right.
The psychological resilience required to process that trauma, while simultaneously maintaining military order, commanding a division, and navigating the immediate aftermath of a global conflict, is staggering.
It really changes how you view the entire timeline of his command. You realize the profound, unseen heavy toll those final months must have taken on everyone involved. Which naturally brings us to the post-war era, his pivot away from the battlefield and his lasting legacy.
Right, because after VE Day, the entire world is trying to figure out how to rebuild and move forward.
Exactly. After the war, the country went into a general election in July 1945. And Roberts actually pivoted to politics. He stood as the Conservative Party candidate for Wimbledon, though the text notes he was unsuccessful in that run. And just to be completely clear to you listening, we are neutrally conveying this historical fact from the source material. We're not endorsing any political side here, just reporting the facts of his life.
Right, and following that election, he transitions back to his military career for a few more years, lending his vast experience to the post-war restructuring.
He commands the 7th Armored Division in 1946. During this time, his rank of Major General is officially confirmed. He then executes this interesting trade of positions with Major General Philip Balfour, taking command of the 2nd Infantry Division, a role he holds until 1949.
Broadening his command experience even further.
Yeah. And finally, he serves as the director of the Royal Armoured Corps, utilizing his technical and tactical mastery to shape the future of British armor before officially retiring from the British Army on September 11, 1949.
It caps off a phenomenal military career, spanning over 2 decades of the most intense technological and global upheaval in modern history. But it leaves us with an interesting final chapter. What does a highly decorated 43-year-old retired Major General do with the entire second half of his life?
Well, he certainly does not slow down. He stays incredibly active across multiple fields. He documents his experiences, writing a book detailing his wartime campaigns titled From the Desert to the Baltic.
Preserving that knowledge.
Exactly. He also transitions his organizational leadership skills into the civilian business sector. He serves as a director of the food manufacturing company Scribbins-Kemp from 1949 until 1964.
A big pivot.
Right. He maintains his connection to the military community by serving as an honorary colonel for the Kent and County of London Yeomanry Squadron. And perhaps most interestingly, he serves his local community directly as a Justice of the Peace from 1960 to 1970.
Moving from commanding thousands of troops across a continent to sitting as a local magistrate is a deeply grounding, community-focused transition.
And the text gives us a truly poetic end to his remarkable story. Pip Roberts spent his final years living quietly in Sussex. He passed away on November 5th, 1997.
And remember his birth date.
Right. He was born on November 5th, 1906, and died on November 5th, 1997, on his exact 91st birthday.
Wow.
So what does this all mean? For you listening to this journey today, I think the absolute core message of this deep dive is that you have to relentlessly master the granular details to earn the right to command the big picture.
Absolutely.
You do not become an outstanding leader by skipping the driving and maintenance school of your chosen profession. You have to deeply understand the machinery. You have to be willing to beta test the new, unproven technology. And you have to prove your competence in the grinding day-to-day operations before you can ever hope to successfully lead the lightning-fast sprint.
That foundational mastery is the key to lasting impact. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that legacy. Think about the complete arc of his life. Here is a man who, in his late 30s, was managing mind-boggling logistics, commanding thousands of armored vehicles, and playing a pivotal role in liberating a continent.
Yeah.
And then he transitions back into civilian life, eventually spending a decade simply serving as a local justice of the peace, likely walking down the street completely unrecognized by many. It invites a fascinating question to explore on your own. What happens to the immense, highly localized institutional knowledge of these peak-performing leaders once they transition back into everyday civilian life?
That's a great question.
Think about your own community. How much tactical wisdom, how much profound crisis management experience from generations past is sitting quietly in our local neighborhoods, completely unrecognized? And how can we be more proactive in seeking out and capturing those hidden, hard-won lessons from the people around us before they are lost to history forever?
Such a powerful thought to end on. A huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an absolute pleasure to share this remarkable story with you today. Keep learning, keep seeking out those hidden lessons, and we will catch you on the next one.